thank you everyone for joining us today. I think we have an exceptional hour or so in front of us here. I'm really pleased to introduce John McGlynn, not only in the fact that he studied here with us at Caledonian University, and by the look of him, probably only a few years ago, in fact, yeah. But John has got a great track record and has got a great history in business that I hope he's going to share and inspire you with. I'm conscious we've got some quite young students and some rather older members of the audience, so it's going to be a good afternoon, I think. Nice to see you, Willie, coming along. Now, John founded his first business whilst at Glasgow Cali, aged just 21, and he now has got degrees in accounting and in law. He's also studied at Harvard Business School, which is a good number 2 after Caledonian. And he's been responsible for establishing more than 80 new ventures. And appropriately, he was a founding director of the Entrepreneurial Exchange in London, and he was also a vice chairman of the Entrepreneurial Exchange in Scotland. At the moment, his business empire revolves around areas like storage, self-storage, property development. But Scottish Capital has been trading for over 2 decades now, and he has a very diverse portfolio of business and a fascination with business from talking to him for a very short time, but reading about him. He has that curiosity and fascination, which I think will prove really helpful today. John's going to talk about his career journey and what drives his success and the key lessons he's learned along the way. And in the context of COP26, John will also share some thoughts on what business and entrepreneurial startups can be doing and playing what part they can play for the planet and the sort of fragile environment which we all share. Okay, I'm going to hand over to the main act, and thank you once again for doing this, John. It's our pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me and for the kind introduction. I'm sure most of you will maybe see the background that I'm actually not in my office in Glasgow or elsewhere. I'm actually have the fun of being at in a very nice hotel in Leger in the French Alps. And with this technology, we can do these kind of things. So I say thanks again for inviting me today. I'll give you a few rambling thoughts on what we've been doing for the last 27 years and how we see the world and what we invest in and why we do it. Like any good story, I think the best place to start is at the beginning. For me, going into business was as natural as you can get because my family had always been in business. The downside to that is you really get to see the ups and downs firsthand. And just to give you a little bit of an example about how you have to be a realist in life, I was quite fortunate that on my first day of primary school, I was dropped off in a DB6 Aston Martin, which was kind of like the James Bond one. And only a few short years later, my first day at secondary school, I got dropped off in a 40 quid Austin Princess. For those who don't know what that is, it was pretty much a bit like a banger that broke down every second day. So, you know, the highs and lows, the ups and downs, for me, that was part of growing up. I saw the good times, I saw the bad times, I saw the fillet steaks, I saw the beans on toast, and thought, you know, the fillet steak days were a lot nicer than the beans on toast days, so let's crack on and get this done. At school, I was actually a complete failure. Over 2 sittings, I don't think I've actually said this publicly before, but over 2 sittings in 5th and 6th year, I got the grand sum of 1 C in my hires, failed everything because I wasn't interested. But my headmaster was great, gave me a great reference, and I managed to get into the HNC in accounting course. Once I got into the HNC in accounting, I loved that because it was financial accounts, marketing, law, all the really good stuff. And I managed to talk my way into the 2nd year of the HND course, which you weren't supposed to do. And then even more amazingly, I managed to get into the degree course at the wonderful Glasgow Caledonian, where I had lots of fun, met lots of great friends, and really learned so much about accounts, which to me, if you're going to do business, having a good knowledge of accounting is just so fundamental. But I wanted to do more than that. What I'd seen over the years is the number of people who were in business who wanted to do things and they couldn't even get their lawyer on the telephone. Now, I didn't really want to know every aspect of law, because my view is you don't need to know the answers, but what you definitely need to know is the questions. So after I graduated from Glasgow Caledonian, it was off to Strathclyde to do law. As John said, I started my first company aged 20 years old. It was the 23rd of December, 1993. Remember it like it was yesterday in the law school library. And we were going to go and get into the parking business. Now, it sounds crazy and it sounds unbelievable, but I promise you this is actually true. I was doing the 2-year accelerated law degree as well as starting a new business. I was going up to the odd class, running down to the car park site, doing all that stuff. And it was insane. You just wouldn't do it today. But it was great. And luckily I had some good classmates who recorded most of the classes and managed to cram for the exams and pass them. What I think we did differently to a lot of people, certainly back in the day, was we never ever did anything short term. The very first car park site we looked at and we bought, I was literally doing 25-year business plans, saying, what will this business look like every 5 years, over 25 years? And this was a little micro, tiny, small business. And then we did the second one and the third one. And when you're 20 years old, to do a 25-year business plan, you say, well, I'm going to be 45. After my 25-year business plan, most people retire at 65. So I need to do a 25-year plan and then a 20-year plan. And that was really the cornerstone of what we did. I was always much more focused on the balance sheet and the net worth. What's this business going to be worth? And you could take short-term losses and really focus on that bigger picture, which again, very few people did. So when you're a startup, nobody knows who you are, nobody knows what you're doing, and you've got to try and tell the world. And there was a trend back in the day that people were using PR, which I didn't even know what that was. But when I was a law student, some of you may remember there was a TV show on STV called Trial by Night, and it was kind of like youth question time. And they quite like to have people who like to talk and have an opinion and go on their show. And it was hosted by Bernard Ponsonby, who's a great guy and remains a good friend to this day. But the real bonus for me in doing that show was Bernard worked in the same building as a lady called Katie Wood. And Katie used to run STV's travel show. So I persuaded Bernard to introduce me to Katie, and we ended up getting our business on STV's travel show, nice prime advert effectively. And the difference that made was astronomical, because everyone who watched that TV show, Scottish Passport, which was more than half of Scotland, everyone knew we were there and we had a new budget car park offering. And to say that the phones didn't stop ringing was a real understatement. So that was a real key moment where it was a chance meeting that sparked off that success. We continued to open up more car park sites and we did different brands. Not only did that avoid brand confusion, but we were able to segment into different markets. So we would have one site that was marketed as the closest, one was marketed as the cheapest, one was marketed as the most expensive. But the real innovation came in 1999. There was a guy I'd been reading about called John Boyle, who set up a business called Direct Holidays. And he was cutting out the travel agents and saying, book with us directly. And I'm absolutely unashamed to say that we absolutely just completely copied that business model. And I opened up a new site and called it Direct Parking. John never sued me, and everyone thought that that was part of his empire. So it was great for us being seen to be linked with a much, much bigger brand. Part of our plan was always to diversify in a way within property. The one thing my dad taught me was, every time you make some money, buy land and buildings, because they ain't making any more of it. And the strategy for me was clear: have trading businesses that generate capital and invest that capital into land and buildings. And that was really the cornerstone of our 25-year thinking. To this day, I own almost every building that we've ever bought, going back to 95 and 96. I guess I'm kind of the magpie of commercial property. We like to buy things, but we don't really like to sell them unless it's to house builders or, you know, the odd exceptional exit. And it's amazing how history repeats itself. So we sat and said, we've had some success in the car park sector, the general property sector, but how can we do something a bit more strategic? And having analysed the property uses, we thought that document storage was quite a good idea. And there was an international company called Iron Mountain, and they were buying up every property, commercial storage, data storage company. Now, because they bought a company called Data Something, and I say that because I can't even remember the name of it myself, but every lawyer, every accountant, every client just knew that the market leader was called Data Something, who'd been bought by this American company. So we had no credibility, no big clients, we're a startup. I started looking at the biggest companies in the world and in the UK, and they had one thing in common. They all had Lord someone as their chairman, or they had Lord someone on their board. And I had a bit of a light bulb moment. I remember being at a conference and I'd met the late Peter Fraser, who was the Lord Fraser of Carmiley QC. Even better, this is the guy that used to be the former Lord Advocate for Scotland. So I thought, who could be better than to be the chairman of this little startup business than Lord Peter Fraser? I phoned him up, met him for a coffee at Edinburgh Airport. He thought I was utterly mad, but then again, most people who knew me thought that as well. And I was delighted that he agreed to be the chairman of the business and gave us instant credibility, and that helped that division grow. So we fast forward a few more years. We're back to the old topic, the only thing I know anything about, which is property. And we really decided it was time to up our game and do a lot more interesting things. So I love traveling. So I spent literally a few years traveling around the world, looking at what are the sub-markets within the property sector. How can you take a property and trade from that property to create added value? And I stumbled across the self-storage industry. In America, it was booming, multi-billion-dollar companies. It was a trend that was spreading across the world. But what I didn't want to do was just get into a Me Too business. If you're just going to be the same as everyone else, then you'll get the same returns as everyone else. So we analysed who are these customers, and what my research taught me was that the best customers to have are business customers, small businesses in particular. They stay longer, the income was more stable, the cost of acquiring a domestic customer and a business customer is the same, so you get more revenue. And it was a little bit of a light bulb moment. What I discovered on speaking to a lot of these small businesses who were using other storage companies is they had other premises. They had a little workspace or they had an office, and they said it was a nuisance having to travel between sites. And we went back to the office and said, why don't we try and put those three products and bolt them together on the one campus? So we bought our first big site into this area, which was the old Mackay's factory in Paisley, which was quite a small site. It was 180,000 square feet. Once again, everyone thought we were utterly mad. But that site today, I can tell you, is absolutely full. Now, if someone had said to me the day we bought that site, you'll fill this site within 10 years, I would have laughed at them. And today, the Storage Vault and the Covault team are on circa 25 properties. We're adding to it all the time, and we want to do a lot more. In terms of what we do out with that, I mean, Storage Vault and Covault is really the cornerstone and the bulk of everything that we do. Other things we've got involved in is I've done some investing with some very good trusted friends. We were involved in some lithium mines in the US. The growth of electric cars means there's a big demand for lithium, so that one seemed to be quite good. We've put smaller amounts of money into various cannabis businesses in the US, all of the legal ones, I would stress. Cannabis edibles, chocolates, things like that. I've got a very good friend in Malibu, and I do some co-investing with him. One of the ones that I'm most excited about is a fund called Juvenescence. They raised 100 million, and it was mainly into longevity. So how can we live longer? How can we be healthier? Lots of gene therapies and really technical stuff that I don't begin to understand, but it's a super fascinating space. And the last one, which I'm quite excited about, is a new challenger bank in Scotland, which will be called Alba Bank. And that one should hopefully be going live quite soon as well. So on to some more kind of bullet points for the students and recent graduates. People always say to me, what do you think as an entrepreneur? And the best definition I can give you is, I think it's a person who's a bit crazy, who can stand up more times than they fall down or they're pushed down. And I think if you're really serious about this, sorry about that, I forgot to put my phone on silent. I think if you're really serious about what you're doing, it becomes a vocation. I mean, I can honestly tell you I've never had a job. I went straight from law school into incorporation, and I would honestly say I've never worked a day in my entire life because I genuinely love what I do. And I'm fortunate that today, if I wanted to do something else, I could go and do something else. Success is all about the numbers. It's about, can you solve a problem? If you can solve a problem for someone, they'll pay you for that service. Can you do something and create a business without running out of cash? Because that's the biggest reason that most businesses fail. It's not that the business doesn't work or the people are wrong, they simply run out of cash. So cash management is absolutely key. And I think you've got to sit back and say, if you do take the plunge into business, why do you deserve to be there? What are you doing that means you should succeed when others fail? And I think the answer is, you got to work harder. You know, if you have got other businesses and they achieve moderate success doing 40 hours a week, then you should strive to get up earlier, go to bed later, make more sacrifices. And if you work 80 hours a week, all things being equal, you'll hit that milestone twice as quick. And then you can go on and do the next project and the next project. It's probably not what you would expect me to say, but I think for those who are thinking about taking the plunge into business, think long and hard about it and think if it's really for you, because what us crazy people do is not for everyone. I've literally been doing this for 27 years now. To me, a normal week is 70, 80 hours of business stuff and working, and it just becomes second nature. No should never be in your vocabulary. You know, if you see a mountain, you've got three options. You go over the top, you go around it, or you tunnel straight through the middle. If you've got the will, there's always a way. The team that you surround yourself with is also going to be absolutely critical. Every business needs a good leader, but you need a fantastic team round about it. And everyone that you work with should be the very best at what they do. For the graduates and the students who are thinking, this all sounds a bit crazy, this is maybe not for me, consider being an intrapreneur. And that's someone who is as entrepreneurial as an entrepreneur, but they do it within a big company, a big organization. And I meet entrepreneurs every day in life, the most fascinating people in the world. One of the things I was asked to touch on was COP26. Now, I must admit, this is not my area of expertise, but what I will say is everyone is now green. There is no such thing as the greens and the non-greens. Everyone is green and people are greener than they've ever been before. Your customers are going to demand that you as a company are green and that you're seen to be doing green things. Now, luckily, I'm able to say that we've been playing our part in this for a long time now. We started installing biomass boilers. Lord Hockey will be delighted that I do listen to him, and we haven't installed heat pumps, which I'm sure he'll talk to you about another time. But we've been putting biomass boilers in place. And for all of the sites that have roofs capable, we're going to install solar panels, and that project is a big, big project for us, several £1 million, and we've got a couple of people dedicated to do that. What I can predict is that Scots could and should lead the world here. You know, we played a huge part in the Industrial Revolution. We invented the modern world, and it's Scottish entrepreneurs who can find a way of doing this and doing it better than anyone else in the world. And I do predict that there will be a couple of people who make vast, vast fortunes by solving the green problems, whether it's carbon capture, new battery technology, you know, there's a whole range of things. So to kind of summarize and bring things to a close, and we can get onto the more exciting Q&A bit, I would say if you think about going into business, really do think long and hard, because it is a vocation. In my view, you should always think long term. Have clear goals written down and then have micro steps as to how you get there. Because to say I want to become a millionaire, if you've got no money, that's a huge task. So you should say to yourself, how do I make 100 grand? And then how do I do that 10 times? How do you make 100,000? Make 10,000 and do that 10 times. And those steps are far more easier in bite-sized chunks. Again, it's maybe not the right thing to say in this kind of era of austerity, but you know what? I don't care. Reward yourself. What really motivated me, and I'm not ashamed to say it, was on my 21st birthday, I thought, I'm going to make so many sacrifices. I need to have some rewards. And the deal I did with myself was, if I couldn't afford a brand new Porsche convertible at 25, I was going to stop and go and practice law or accounts or do something else. And I really should say thank you to Porsche, because I couldn't afford to have bought a brand new 911 convertible, but luckily they brought out the Porsche Boxster, and I did order a brand new one, Arctic Silver, Metropole blue leather. I could tell you every extra on that car because I wrote it down and memorized it, and I could visualize it. And I got it delivered 4 weeks before my 25th birthday, but I couldn't drive it because I couldn't get anybody to insure me. Cherish your reputation. It's the only thing that you've only got one of, and when it's gone, it's gone, and when it's gone forever. Surround yourself with the best people, friends, workmates, advisors, because you really are seen as the person that you mix with. So choose your company wisely. I think you've got to be prepared to work harder than everyone else, get up earlier, go to bed later, and do whatever it takes. That's the only recipe for success that I'm aware of, that I know, and it's what I subscribe to. On that note, thank you very much for inviting me to spend some time with you guys this afternoon, and good luck to everybody in the future, and I hope we've got some good questions.
Thank you, John. That was such an interesting talk, and we really appreciate you being here today. And we are pleased to be joined today by staff, graduates and students from across our Glasgow, London and New York campuses. So I know we've got a number of pre-submitted questions that we'll get started on, but if you'd like to ask John a question, you can do so by putting this in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. I'll ask on your behalf. Or if you'd like to ask a question in person, just click the raise hand button, which can be found in the reactions icon at the bottom of your screen. So we'll get started with one of our pre-submitted questions. And the first one comes from Josh, who's a graduate. And he asks, I know you're a big fan of Elon Musk. What do you think makes him so successful, and what can everyone else learn from him?
That's a great question. And, you know, I should say that I've been a huge fan of Elon Musk before he became the richest man in the world. But you got to think about this, right? Who wakes up one morning and says, we need to colonize Mars? I mean, I talked about big goals, but in terms of big goals, they really don't get much bigger than that. And if you look at what Elon Musk has done, he's literally changed the world. And in my view, deserves to be the richest man in the world. Before him, very few people were really into electric cars. Solar panels were things that other people had. SpaceX, I mean, I just think he's the most phenomenal individual. But the key lesson that you learn from Elon Musk is he works harder than everyone else. He works longer hours than everyone else. And I don't know if people know this, but he's recently given up all of his possessions, and he now lives in a small box hut type house on his SpaceX campus because he wants to really dedicate all of his time. So, you know, he can afford to live anywhere and do anything. And I think his dedication to the cause is just remarkable.
Yep, thank you very much. And the next one comes from Nikolai. He's a graduate, and he asks, how is software and data shaping investing, not investing in tech, but using tech to invest? Well,
again, another great question. And I think, you know, that kind of takes us almost into the kind of crypto domain, the way finance is being used. I mean, you just have to look at the company TransferWise that was developed in Estonia, where, you know, people could buy currencies in their own countries, and they would save people a lot of money by using that technology platform. If you look at cryptocurrencies, whether you like crypto, you believe in it or not, I'll tell you, they're here to stay. They're not going anywhere. And I think that within the next 5 to 10 years, every currency is going to be a cryptocurrency. We're going to have Bitcoin, we're going to have the digi-dollar, and the tech finance revolution hasn't even got started. So I think it's the space to really if I was back at university, I'd know more about this than anyone else, because that's the future. Become an expert in that. You can write your own ticket and jobs.
Thank you very much. That's really useful. And then the next one comes from Stephen, who's a graduate, and he says, if you could go back in time to give yourself one piece of solid and sound advice when you were a student, what would this be?
Well, that's an easy one. In 2011, watch out for this thing called Bitcoin. Borrow as much money as you can and buy as much of it as you can.
Good advice. And then we've got another one from Linda, who's a student, and she asks, have you got any ideas or recommendations for a business startup for funding streams other than the traditional business plan to a bank?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question too, because the one thing I didn't touch on today that I would strongly recommend is getting good mentors. You know, when I was starting my business, I joined the Entrepreneurial Exchange in 1999, and you know, basically every business name you could think of was in that organization, and you got to go and listen to the world leading experts talking about things at little dinners and focus dinners and events. And I think there's a pretty big investment community out there now. There's fewer people who invest in startups, but I think small businesses, there's a lot of people out there who do venture capital and private equity style funding. And what you really want is, you know, sure, everybody's watched Dragon's Den and Shark Tank, but having a startup business or a new business and getting that injection of knowledge. I mean, I think the knowledge is worth a lot more than the money. You know, it's quite easy to go and borrow money, but if you can get someone who's got a real understanding about the sector you want to be in, you literally can't buy that. But with an investment, with a shareholding, then, you know, you can. So it's a great way forward. And you're more likely to get money from banks if you've got, you know, someone with huge experience and invested as well. So it's a very smart idea.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And then we've got one in the chat from Ewan who says, great talk and advice. Interested in your point about entrepreneurs. Could you elaborate on that and some examples of things you've seen some of them do?
I think most of the entrepreneurs that everyone knows the name of, you know, everyone's got the same kind of business outlook. It really is a vocation, and it's not for everyone. And it really does mean that, you know, the buck stops with you, and it's a pretty lonely place, because if you're the crazy person who gets up at 5 or 6 in the morning and you work until 10 at night and you've got all these other pressures and you can't go out drinking with your pals because you're so busy, there's actually not a huge amount of crazy people like that out there. So it can be quite a lonely club to be in. But really, if you want to succeed, certainly in the early days, that's normal. You know, you've got to be prepared for that. And it's people who just don't take no for an answer, because I'm a big believer in there's always multiple solutions to every problem. Some are more difficult than others, but if you just keep going, you should find the answer. And if you don't know the answer, think of the smartest person you know. And even business people and entrepreneurs, you know, try that crazy phone call or an email to somebody and say, I've got this big problem. I think 5 or 10 minutes of your time, you could help me solve it. And you'd be amazed actually at the number of people who agree to take your call or, you know, reply in an email. You'd be astounded.
Perfect, thank you. And then Robert says, work harder or work smarter or both?
100% both.
Perfect, thank you. And the next one we have comes from Pamela, who's a graduate, and she asks, where do you see the future of truly affordable small space housing headed in the UK?
Well, I think that's one that has to be directed at Lord Hawkey. But I think it's the micro living is a really, really good idea. And I think the housing sector is going to be disrupted hugely. There's loads of very smart people looking at that space saying we need to change how we do it. And, you know, I've seen the kind of WeWork for homes and the kind of co-working in smaller cities and things. I think there's a lot of innovation going to happen there for sure.
That's great, thank you. And we've got another one in the chat from John who says, as an entrepreneur
Sorry, I missed that. I thought that was my phone.
Sorry. As an entrepreneur with over 80 investments, how have you managed setbacks, and do you have any examples?
Sorry, I missed that last bit. How do I manage to what?
How have you managed setbacks, and do you have any examples?
Oh, listen, being in business is like a game of snakes and ladders, right? You've got good things happen to you every day, and you maybe get 3 days in a row where something great happens, and then you have a disaster, and you feel like you've been put back 10 places. But it's one of those things. I mean, I try and only focus on 3 things at any one time. If you've got an inbox and a to-do list and things to think about, I reckon the average human brain, unless you're like you've got a brain the size of Elon Musk's, I think the average person can really only focus on about 3 things at one time. And I try and mentally have that mental 3 list and go, right, of these, which is the most important? And you give some time to that and then get rid of it. And then number 4 slots into number 3. It just kind of, I always try and think about this like the mental filing cabinet, where you think, put that back in the drawer and deal with it later. But it's not easy. And people who know me, I am a bit of a spreadsheet fiend, so I do keep every single part of my life on spreadsheets, so it helps to keep it on track, much to the annoyance of people that I send them to and get them to comment and things on it. But yeah, spreadsheets are a great thing to learn how to use. Sorry to sound like a bit of a finance geek, but
no, that's great, thank you. And we've got another one from Patrick, who is a graduate, and he asks, how did you start your website, and what would you say are the do's and don'ts?
I think that websites are really critical for every business you have now. So, your website is your shop window to the world. And I think the key thing you got to focus on that is to say, who is the customer? What does the customer actually want? And always put yourself, in terms of a website, the number of websites that people get catastrophically wrong, I find amazing. Because you got to try, and some websites you have to try and sift through to find the product. I mean, obviously, one of the best websites in the world is Amazon, much to the annoyance of me when I'm doing my credit card bills every month, because they just make it so easy to buy things with one click. It's addictive, it's just like one click and I've bought it. So, depending on who your customer is, ask 10 people before you launch a website to look at the beta version and say, you're a customer, does this work for you? Because it's all about the customer journey. One click and you're on someone else's website.
Yeah, definitely, that's very true. And we've got another pre-submitted one here from Fiona, and she asks, what single piece of advice would you give to an undergraduate interested in going into business?
Again, it's probably not what you would expect someone to say. It's supposed to try and be a bit kind of motivational, but think long and hard about it, because I say it really is, to do it properly and to achieve high levels of success, it's not a job, it's a vocation. You've got to really want to do it, and you've got to want to do it more than anyone else. And if you look at the most successful entrepreneurs in Scotland, people just keep doing more and more of it because it's addictive. It's like success is like a drug. It's like going back to sugar in the 13th century. When you achieve a win in business, you want another one and another one. And it's not about making more money, because at the end of the day, business ends up becoming a bit like a game. It's motivationally, can you actually go and, get to the next level and get that next deal done? But it's not for everyone. If it's for you, go for it and give it 100%. But if it's not for you, think about maybe entrepreneurship as an alternative option, because not everyone has to be one of the crazy gang.
Yep, that's great advice, thank you. And just a reminder, if anybody has any questions for John, just put them in the chat and I can ask on your behalf. Or if anybody wants to ask a question in person, click the raise hand and we can unmute you and you can ask your question directly to John. But we've got another question in the chat from Robert, and he asked, John, you mentioned the importance of knowing your numbers. Can you emphasize the importance of this even to non-financial individuals, including those in HR?
100%. I mean, every business is driven by numbers. And I've said, if you say to somebody in my office, any person in the office at all, what would I say about numbers? If you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. And I think everyone has to know the numbers. Everyone has to know what's the direction of travel. Where is the North Star? Where are we going? Why are we going there? What are we doing? I think it's important that every single person in the office knows what the plan is, what the direction is, what the aims and objectives are. I mean, I would hope everybody in my office knows 1, 3, 5, and 10 years, what we're doing and what are the targets. And I think it's really important that everyone understands the journey, because sometimes a decision will be made or something will happen that could be perceived as positive or negative. And if you look at that in isolation, it would look crazy. But if you understand the direction and the big picture, it might make a bit more sense.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we've got another one here from Carl, and he asks, when are you going to invest in self-storage in the US?
This is my old friend from California, Carl Toohey, and he knows very well that we will never invest in the US because we couldn't possibly compete with him. He does it too well in what he does over there. So I'll leave the US to Carl, and he can leave the UK and Europe to us.
That's great, thank you. We've got a question here now from Honorary Grad Lord Willie Hockey. It's lovely to have you join us, Willie. And he's asked, funding is vital in growing a business. Where do you see inflation and interest rates going?
That's a great question, and I'm glad that I didn't put a bet on with Lord Hockey on this one, because I would have lost the bet. In business terms, business inflation for us is between 40 and 50%, which is crazy by any benchmark. But all the building materials we buy and things, it's just absolutely crazy. So inflation, last official results was 4.2%. I can confidently predict the next official results, it will be higher for sure. Interest rates, I hope, will continue to stay low because it's good for the economy and good for business, but I can't see any alternative but the Bank of England having pressure to put rates up. But I don't think they'll go to crazy levels. I think the biting point is going to be a political judgment with the targets that are given to the Bank of England. And I suspect the pressure on businesses and households with mortgages, I think interest rates will hopefully for the next couple of years stay at what the country would say are fairly sensible levels. Bad for savers, but great for everyone else.
Thank you very much. And this seems to be our last question in the chat. If nobody else has anything, if you could just put it in the chat now if you still like to ask a question. But John says, is there anything you would still like to achieve in your career? You mentioned short-term plans, and that could be 10 to 25 years. So what are the next plans for John McGlynn?
To be honest, it sounds cliched, but I genuinely love what I do every single day. I mean, I'm doing this chat with you guys from an amazing little ski village in the Alps. And with technology nowadays, you can really work from anywhere and do anything. I love what we do, and we just want to keep building each of the companies that we're invested in to make them as big and as successful as we possibly can. One of the things that we take great pride in is a number of small businesses that we work with. And I don't call them customers. I really do think all the small businesses who are in storage vault centres and co-vault centres, they're people that we work with. And we want to engage with these companies a lot more and see them grow and help and develop. So I get a bit of a buzz from that. But I just think, if you're in business, you want to make your business as big and as successful as it can be. There's only so many cars you can buy. There's only so many houses you can have, and trinkets and motivational toys, for want of a better word. And I think when you get that stuff out of the way, it's really about making a difference in your sector. So we just want to make each of the businesses we're involved in as big and as successful as they possibly can be. And, everybody in the office will tell you we've got some pretty ambitious targets for the next 3 and 5 years. One of the divisions that the task is to double it. And that sounds quite ambitious, but the team at HQ have got a very, very detailed plan, all those little micro steps, how they're going to achieve that month by month. And they said, what do we do when we double it? I said, do you need to ask? I want you to double it again. So, I think you just keep going and make things as big and as successful as you can.
That's great, thank you. And Robert's just put in there, do you miss Paisley?
I don't miss Paisley because I'm there. I'm back in Paisley every month, flying to Glasgow Airport, and the mothership, our very first site was in Paisley. Mother and aunt still live in Paisley, so I'm there all the time, and it's a wonderful town. For people who've never visited Paisley, go and visit it. It's great.
Perfect, thank you so much. I think that's all the questions we've got. If nobody else has any, So I'll now hand back over to Professor John Lennon just to close today's event. Thank you, John.
Yeah, I actually had put a question in, John. I'm just interested in your view on ESG, which is very much in the news. For the students, those are environmental, social, and governance stocks, which aren't giving the kind of returns that many fund managers would be more appreciative of, but they're facing pressure from investors and wider attention to get into this. So it's an interesting time. And I just wondered where you stood on that, because I know you're interested in crypto, which can have phenomenal returns, and Tesla, etc. So what about ESG?
I've got to confess, it's not my area of real expertise, but I think the reason that fund managers won't be keen to jump into those kind of stocks is because they have a legal obligation to maximize returns for their investors within certain risk constraints. Scottish Mortgage Trust is, the returns on that fund are huge, mainly because of Tesla and the other tech stocks. I mean, I must be one of the few people in the world who actually still thinks Tesla is undervalued. And I bought into Tesla 120, 130, something like that. I wouldn't dream of selling a Tesla share, because to me, it's a technology company that's literally changing the world. And I might regret that and lose some money, but I don't think so. Crypto, that's an entirely different thing. I've been doing crypto since 2017. Had some eye-watering returns, and we have bought and sold in that sector. But I've got a fairly chunky part of my net wealth is in crypto, and it's just locked away, and I've no intentions of selling it, because it's a very much a long-term gamble. It goes to zero or it goes to telephone numbers. And that's not a recommendation that anyone actually buys crypto. And if anyone does, I would say don't invest any more than you would spend on a really good, crazy night out, because it's either zero or the moon. But I think unless you get changes to the rules, you're not going to get people investing in funds that don't deliver the best results.
Yeah, I mean, it is the dilemma, because the returns are problematic, but and the students should note that this headline claim that John is making about Tesla being undervalued. This is the complete opposite from what all the pundits and all the financial press are saying. They're comparing Tesla with companies like Volkswagen, who own 9 or 10 brands of cars, from luxury marques to major volume production like Volkswagen, like Skoda. But they have been producing and making cars, generating profit for quite some time. And now, of course, Tesla, who are very much at the beginning of that production cycle and very much at the beginning of the profit cycle, are valued, significantly higher. And what John is saying is actually he thinks it's going to jump further.
Yeah, I would say that, but just so that I don't sound like a complete crazy person, I'll give you a couple of bullet points as to why I think that is. Tesla isn't a car company. Tesla is a technology company who manufactures cars as part of what they do. Tesla has got more AI in the driverless car space than every other company combined by a factor of 10. So the knowledge that they're building up about every junction in every town, every city in the world that they have cars is growing exponentially. The other key thing about Tesla is they want to turn the asset of a car, which is actually a liability, into a genuine asset. When full self-driving kicks in, Uber has got a valuation of about, I think the last time I checked, it was about 80 billion, and they only get 20% of the take from the Uber service, and the driver gets the 80%. So if you're Elon Musk and you've got Tesla, who's got self-driving cars, and you can buy a self-driving car that integrates on your new Tesla phone, which, by the way, is going to be better than the iPhone, and that car knows that you're going to the office 9 to 5, and your car is free, from 9 to 4:45, that liability car is going to actually make you some money by doing Uber-style services. Now, a lot of people think that's crazy, it will never happen. I would say, honestly, watch this space. And if you look at the innovation that they've got, and I'm not saying that no company in the world will ever take over Tesla, but Tesla right now is so far ahead, I honestly wouldn't bet against them.
Okay, well, that's your hot tip, everyone. You got to buy Tesla stock.
For the purpose of the tape, it is not a tip. I am not authorized to give financial advice. I am not giving financial advice. I'm merely sharing some ramblings that I may have going on in my mind.
Yeah, the price of
on the basis of what I've said, and certainly don't sue me if it goes wrong.
Yeah, we should put in the caveat that the price of investments can go down as well as up, and you take your own risks. But it is crazy times when we have to reevaluate everything that we used to teach on how you value companies and how you anticipate the future, because we're in a, we were saying previously, a time of precipices and big changes. But that's a good time. And the one thing I would also say to students is, if you read about Musk, who is fascinating, whatever you think about him, he is that workaholic picture that you have painted, John, of the successful entrepreneur. Even now, the richest man in the world, his commitment to the factory and to the research and to the company is unstinting. I mean, he's there all the time, and this is a guy who doesn't party much. He is, you do hear about the occasional glitch, but essentially this is a very driven, work-oriented guy, who'll work incredibly long hours from everything that's reported about him. So, endlessly fascinating, but it reaffirms what you were saying about, if you really want to do this, you have to be driven. And it has to be the center of your central life interest. But if you enjoy it, then that's the best thing. The worst thing is you're in a job you hate because you're wasting your life.
I think that's the key difference between a business person and an entrepreneur. You can run a business and you can do it 9 to 5 and you can make a very nice life for yourself. But the definition of an entrepreneur, I think, is that the tiny bit of craziness, madness there, that you just want to go and do things that other people can't or won't do. And sometimes but quite often, most people I know, you get a real kick out of the achievement rather than the financial success from that achievement. If you can do things that people say you're crazy, you can never do that, you get more of a buzz from actually achieving it. Certainly most of the people I know that I would put in that category is the same. And if you've got a product or a service that is really changing, your country or your city or whatever your services are, to actually do something that makes a big, big difference, as well as making good financial returns, I mean, that's just a double bonus.
Okay. Well, listen, that has been really fascinating and much appreciated. And I think we will definitely be using this as a teaching aid, as an aid for students at various points. And what I will say now is, once you get back from your work leisure break there, we would like to get you into the university, at the very least, to chew the fat again in person with some of our students when you get a moment on your schedule. But it would be great to get you to come in and maybe look at some of our startup businesses that we have in our incubator, because I think they would really benefit from some thoughts and some overview. And I think I know that would be appreciated. But thank you very much for this afternoon, and I'm sorry to take you off the slopes.
No problem. More than happy to do that. Let's just keep in touch and we'll get that in the diary. And thank you for inviting me along this afternoon, and thanks for everyone for tuning in. Hope you got something from those rambling thoughts.
Not rambling at all, John. They were fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay.
Cheers.